Hello and welcome to FreightWaves Now, Wednesday edition, and we're bringing to you what is happening right now. We're bringing you also the inaugural appearance of Mike Intermodal O'Brien. That's right, Mike is our intermodal market expert, and he's going to be bringing it to us right now just a little bit about what is happening with like all of the intermodal activity, and based out of Ontario, California. Why? Because it's a very large port. That's why. And also we're going to be bringing you market expert Anthony Smith again, back-to-back days. He is one of our economic experts, and he's going to be talking about one of the very important aspects of the economy, which is consumer spending. All right, so let's get started. I'm seeing some precipitation out here on our weather map, but I am no chief meteorologist, so I can't really talk about that. Mike O'Brien, welcome for your first time here on FreightWaves Now.
Appreciate it. It's good to be here. What we're going to be talking about is really the first quarter snapshot of what happened with the railroads, but we're going to be taking a little bit deeper dive into actual intermodal traffic. Overall, the railroads were down roughly 1.5% carloads, total carloads, which includes intermodal. Normally that will raise an eye as to what the whole economy is doing, because the railroads touch so many parts of the economy itself. I mean, lumber, automobiles, retail, etc. So they're usually a really good indicator of what's going on in the economy as a whole. But more specifically, we're going to be talking about domestic intermodal, which is containers and trailers.
So let's back up and give our audience kind of an overview of the chart that you've pulled up and what you're cross comparing. It's a really cool looking index you've got here.
Yeah, we've got Ontario as the backdrop because, as we've been talking about really for most of the year, it is the one hot market in the United States that's kind of carrying a lot of the truckload and intermodal activity at this point. And then we laid over the top what we consider intermodal, which are containers that are that lime green color, and trailers, which are the orange color, which make up intermodal itself. And what's really cool about Sonar is, I mean, the graph tells the story. I mean, you go back, it's real easy to identify your holidays. Holiday, 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 holiday. What's really cool about this is this spike right here. Normally in intermodal, the party's over right here. If the goods aren't in the DCs, on their way to the stores for retail season, it's not going to make it at this point. But this is an anomaly. This is where we're seeing all that freight that got pushed forward to avoid the tariffs, that's just a crazy picture to me.
So what happened here in December, this spike back up is an anomaly?
Yes, normally, like I said, normally the party's over here.
Yeah.
And then intermodal will get back in its normal cadence. But right here shows a pretty good picture of the rush everybody had to get those products in to avoid tariffs.
And then I've noticed that it has spiked back up at least from Ontario, the Ontario market, for like the rest of 2019 so far.
Right. I think a lot of these goods that got pushed forward are part of the story why outbound's so heavy in Ontario.
Yeah. And
rails just got back on its normal cadence. So, we said overall, the total carloads were down like 1.5%. It normally 3 to 5% is the point where people get a little uncomfortable, because that signals that something's not just right in the economy.
Mike, I was wondering, I thought maybe things had been slowing down a little bit, what with the Chinese New Year having passed us, with some of the headwinds of weather, but it looks as if Ontario and that market is just as high. I thought warehousing was at capacity. I didn't know that they were still just like having such high volume.
Yeah, but what we're seeing with the intermodal, they're back on kind of a year over year. Year over year with intermodal in the first quarter, they were down 0.6%. And any negative in the railroad world is seen as a negative, but I actually see it kind of as a positive for all the headwinds they had. when you look at all that freight when you look at all the freight that was brought forward before the new year, that's freight that probably would have normally spilt over into their first quarter, which would have increased their volumes. And then on top of that, you've got competition with truck. I mean, we've all seen the trucking market is slightly depressed, and the first freight that there's competition for is intermodal. If truck gets stuck in a certain market, they'll lower rates to move that truck. So there's some competition with truck, and then you see, that looks like a holiday, but we don't slow down for Valentine's Day. I mean, that's bad weather.
That's bad weather?
There was just weather event after weather event after weather event in February. And then you kind of
we had the polar vortex in the Midwest. We had lots of snow in the West, in the Sierras, and in the Colorado area. So I remember that, and of course now there's been flooding, but I don't think that was during the time when the flooding was happening.
No,
right?
This was, there was flooding. I mean, there was significant events out west, but in the Midwest, it seemed like it hit the same week every day, week after week after week. And it didn't so much slow the railroads down, it slowed the carriers' ability to get the freight to and from the rail, which slowed the whole market down there for a bit. But moving into March, you had your stress with the US and China, and you had the floods, which we're still not fully recovered from, but the UP and the BN are getting those corridors repaired, getting everything back up and moving. So overall, with specifically looking at intermodal, just being down 0.6% with all those factors that came into play, I think that's a pretty good quarter.
Okay, so in general, we're seeing year over year kind of what you're thinking is fairly normal with some headwinds of weather maybe providing a little resistance here. Of course, trailer we're seeing is actually a little down right now.
What's happening with trailer is the railroads are obviously going to prefer containers where you can double stack. Obviously, you'd rather have two pieces of revenue on one flat car than one trailer. So there's some lanes that the railroads have actually cut out where they're running trailers. So that's got the trailer on a little bit of a slide. But overall, looking forward, the best of my ability, I don't think there's going to be any significant large growth in the intermodal. But for now, it seems they're holding their own, and they should track similar in cadence to last year.
Well, that is great. What do you attribute the sustained high volume coming into, or I guess now out of, the Ontario market? Are they still trying to get ahead of these tariffs? I know no one can predict what's going to happen with them.
I know the spike in volume here. A lot of this freight that got pushed forward obviously wasn't long haul, so intermodal's not getting to participate in it. A lot of it's probably shorter regional haul trucking, and it still has the warehouses full. And we've seen that for some time. We've had a lot of guys report on Ontario. That's why I kind of chose that slide, because it seems to be the market that's really carrying things now, and it's also just one of the largest intermodal markets. It is the largest intermodal market we have. So.
Thank you. Fantastic. Mike O'Brien bringing it to us on intermodal, which actually is a leading economic indicator, because what is happening on those rails can tell us a lot about housing activity, construction, what is happening with automobiles as well. So, as a segue to bring us in talking about the economic puzzle, Anthony Smith, welcome back to Back Days. Great to have you on.
Thanks. Great to be back. Just couldn't stay away. Right here, we're going to start taking a look at kind of a continuation of what we saw yesterday with some housing data. Yesterday, we looked at housing starts. Okay. And here we have the total housing starts in the U.S. And what we're going to be looking at here is this downward trend that we've seen lately. We haven't seen that uptick that we've been expecting earlier on, and that's really kind of starting to, I think, play to people's expectations of the overall strength of the economy. One of the recent data points that came out was construction spending.
Right.
And what we saw in construction spending on a month-to-month basis was that there was a slight uptick for residential construction spending. And so it's easy to see that as some very positive news and really see that uptick as of movement into another cycle. And so what is really important is to look at the entire trend altogether. And when we look at this moving average here, we see that the trend has not been broken just yet and is still in that lower cycle overall. So when we're looking at
and you've got a 5-year look for us. Well, right? So you had the 5-year
correct.
Look at us with that moving average, and it does look pretty elevated and hot.
Correct. And
besides that one trough there.
Right. And so that's what exactly we saw a huge uptick over the last few years, and then we haven't quite seen that activity as we saw the year before. And speaking of spending here, we have total public construction on a moving average, and what we see here is this huge rise, 7.5%, and that's coming from total public construction spending. And a lot of that is coming from spending on highways and streets. So we are seeing spending in construction, but a lot of the strength right now is coming from the government sector.
Okay, and were you going to tell us about consumer spending as well?
So consumers are still active and they're in a good place. So we have still some pent-up demand, but pent-up demand can only last for so long until you can only buy so many cars and so many houses. But as a whole, the consumer is still in a great spot with decent and good wage rates, great employment numbers, and we're seeing that the consumer is feeling pretty confident about the overall economy. This is going to be a great backdrop and a great underpinning for the overall economy, and really is going to support a lot of the trends that we expect to see holding up in the rest of the year. Because
consumer spending represents a tremendous amount of our economy.
That's correct. When we're looking at GDP as a whole, consumers are going to make up around 66 to 67% of that. So they are a very huge part of the U.S. economy as a whole. Okay.
Well, thank you, Anthony. Appreciate that back-to-back, a look at what is happening right now with the data that we have as respects to what is happening in freight and intermodal and the overall economic pie, how it affects the logistics industry. So thanks for tuning in. Check us out on our new channel, on our YouTube channel that we have for FreightWaves Now. Would love to see you there. Thanks for sharing the love. And we will see you tomorrow on FreightWaves.com. In the meantime, don't worry, be happy.